the leadership team for Women Time Women. And we have here a lovely panel. Most of you guys probably already know Ayesha. Raise your hands if you do. Have you heard of her? One person who's understood how to use social media so effectively and AI, and there's no person better to learn from on how to build a company. And that's the topic of today. I'm focused on Asia businesses in Accenture, and it's all about data. And that is what this conversation is all about. But before we go there and we hear the anecdotes from Ayesha, two people that we should all be thanking is Kabir and is Kabir in the room?
Yes.
That's called timing. And also Chandan. Thank you, B Capital, for hosting us here and for giving us a chance. With this, I will pass on to Chandan to come and help us carry out the fireside chat. Chandan, over to you.
Ayesha. Thanks, Vani. I think Ayesha needs no introduction, so I'm not going to do a formal introduction and just deep dive directly into all the burning questions we have. So I think Ayesha, I've been a huge fan of your work, and I think you've been in Paris was the OG in AI. I remember in 2017 I used to work at Twitter with Marie, and I remember that Addo.AI won the Forbes leading AI companies from Southeast Asia. So talk us a bit through your journey. What prompted you to get into AI, as well as what's been your journey as a founder? How did you start and how have you scaled up this company?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. For me it was very interesting growing up in Lahore. I encountered engineering and science in a way that really put me off the whole STEM field. Because for every question there was a predetermined answer. And I was very good at memorizing, and so I did very well. But I had no interest after the exam, I forgot everything. And then when I went to Harvard, I was studying literature and development economics, and I met these people from Estonia and Russia, Bulgaria, Croatia, and they had a very unique way of looking at math and computer science and science. For them, they could speak about Borges and labyrinths in one breath, and they could speak about number theory in another. It was, both things were a quest for curiosity, and every answer was an approximation to the truth, which actually probabilistically is true. But it was so poetic, so creative for someone like me who loves to write plays, produce movies. I started a magazine on Wall when I was in Wall Street. So for me, it was, wow, this is exciting. I can build something and I can be creative. And that is how I got into AI. And in my junior year, I would hang around these gentlemen, and they had this desktop and they would be running neural networks on it. And they were very menial, small neural networks, but I was just fascinated. So then when I went to Wall Street, I was a software engineer who was given all the PhDs from like Stanford and Harvard and math and physics would write these quant models, algorithmic trading, and then us poor engineers would code them. But I was exposed to high latency, low latency, high frequency data, and the power of analytics to actually be able to do forecasting, to be able to do trading, decades ago almost, right? And so after that, then I was all over Wall Street, only doing this, like using data to think about risk management of credit derivatives. Then at DTCC, where we said this is not reconciling, and lo and behold, the financial crisis happened. And looking at Bank of America, looking at Toronto Dominion Bank, working with my friends to specifically think about data, and in doing so, I became data native. And essentially, when I look, I see pixels on people's pictures, right? But that really became, this is how we look at a firm when we go in. We look at the infrastructure of the firm as fundamentally data infrastructure. So then I went for my PhD, and then my husband said, I'm not going back to New York. My in-laws are Indian, but had immigrated to New York. He grew up there. And he said, let's go to Singapore. And I said, we have 2 babies, and I said, okay. So we came here, and after a few years advising the government and doing some other things, I noticed a gap and said, I want to go back to my first love, which is data. And we started Addo, which is an AI engineering firm. It's a consulting firm, but a very kind of niche one, because that's all we do. We're data and AI geeks. And we hire everybody like that. And I would go to people and talk about AI, it's just a few years ago. And people would call me into their board like a circus act. Because they never meant it. They just thought it was some strange thing. They wouldn't believe it. It was such an uphill battle. Nobody cared about data. They just wanted me to do something that Google couldn't even do. Because they never understood it. But then, and we got SMRT, then we got ComfortDelGro, we got UOB, we got Singtel, we went to America, we got Pfizer as clients. So we started getting clients and started noticing a sea change in people beginning to understand the importance of the data that feeds the algorithm. And then, of course, the solutions that come from it. And I think for me as a founder, what was really important was to realize that execution is no longer interesting. Yeah, it's IT people, right? In the olden days, as my son likes to say. We just believe in delivering a product. You will deliver it on a page. But nobody cares about AI like that. You have to actually have adoption. So I started telling my team, we only judge success on adoption of execution. And that means we have to do things that we're uncomfortable with, which is work with the users, prototype, and work with them to adopt things. We made an incredible algorithm that could predict chronic heart disease before, like years before, a patient would have it by looking at huge amounts of data, unstructured and structured, clinical notes, diagnostics, heart scans, but the doctors wouldn't take the recommendation because they didn't trust it. And so that was a very big, one of my first lessons early on. And I think that's been my journey. Now with generative AI, it's a whole other amazing era in AI because we have this incredible technology that's moving very fast, and I know we're going to talk about it, that has piqued the interest of everyone. It is moving much faster than I could have anticipated. And believe me, I read the singularities here like 18 years ago. Okay, I read Kurzweil. I had drunk the Kool-Aid and still it's going way faster. Which is why you see all these people freaking out. I'll just end by saying that a friend of mine is invited to all these billionaires, and there's some billionaires here also. But there's these retreats in Silicon Valley, and apparently they're all excited, also very depressed about AI, because they think that it's just going to take over and kill our species. So that's the level at which people are thinking.
So Kathy, from a more inspirational point of view, for a lot of founders in the ecosystem, what do you think are some of the more exciting opportunities in AI? I mean, we review pitch decks every day, right? And pretty much every day, AI is in every pitch deck. In fact, I was counting. Over the last few months, I've reviewed 200 pitch decks. Only one didn't mention AI. I especially spent some time with the founder and trying to understand why he hadn't included it. But what do you think are some more exciting opportunities coming in AI? But also, what are some of the more overlooked opportunities which people aren't talking about yet, that people should be thinking about as they build and scale businesses from here?
Well, I think now it's amazing, right? Everybody Nani and Dadi and puppy can do AI now. I never meet anybody who's not an AI expert. But I think that there are two types of companies that use AI. One is a company that uses the existing processes and it automates it. And that's the low-hanging fruit, right? You automate it, and you're able to actually improve your P&L, you're immediately able to reduce well-known metrics, for example, if you were doing customer service in terms of KPIs for satisfaction, time to resolution, etc. Then is the next stage, which is, look, this is not an automation story, it's a growth story, which now CIOs are coming and saying, everybody's talking about automation, but we're going to grow the company. So how are you going to grow that base, the customer experience, and the customer journey, and so on and so forth. And then there's another kind of company, which is AI native to start with. So it's full stack AI, and it doesn't need that many people. And so we see that, and a lot of our clients, like governments and large companies, they are not reimagining business processes from the core. And I think that's a mistake they're making. Because we went through this era of robotic process automation, which was kind of a low-level way of connecting and automating processes. But it's like I'll just continue with the same thing, and I'll keep doing it, I'll automate it. And yes, that saves you time and money, but you have fundamentally re-engineered and gone to the potential AI. But now with a lot of these young companies, what we're seeing is that they are building the infrastructure, which requires some thinking. And they're building their company with fewer people and with a tech stack that is the AI tech stack. And I think that is very, very exciting and overlooked. The other thing that's exciting is, or rather is overlooked, is that people do not understand change management at all. So you have techies are excited, and the CEOs, I love these CEOs, they all compete with each other. So one will come from cover of a magazine and say, I'm now fintech, I'm not tech. The other will say, I'm an AI firm, I'm not a healthcare company. And then they'll bring that to people like me and say, how did we get here? Why is he or she on the cover? So, but it's like quicksand in large companies. And again, I deal with large companies that are existing. So people don't understand cultural change management. That's a real opportunity because it doesn't get executed right. And startups don't have what these large companies have. They have distribution. So you go, you say, well, there's Pronovo, now there's their function, like let's say Pronovo, right, which is a full body MRI in the US, costs $2,500 and has served 100,000 people. Amazing. You can go there, you can watch Netflix, I've done it, great 45-minute experience. Now, the co-founder of Spotify came out and he said, you know what, I'm also going to do MRI, and you don't even have to lie down, you just stand up and do it, and that's available in London with EcoHealth, and that's going to cost $290 million. And he has 100,000 people on the list, and they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Mayo Clinic has 1 million patients annually. You want to tell me who is distribution investor? You want to tell me what they spend money on, all of this massive amount of money people, investors give them? I think after a point they put it on customer acquisition because the AI doesn't cost that much anymore. And so for large companies, when they say they're too late, I'm like, no, it's not too late. Go and buy these companies, copy them, acquire them, incubate them, license them, and you have this amazing opportunity to actually do something for your customer base. And in this hype and noise, that's what people mess up on.
I think, to that point, like I spent many years in social media before moving to venture capital. And what we saw in the social media journey was the user adoption sort of overtook the regulations, and regulations still trying to catch up, right? And still figure out how to be able to control platforms like Meta and Twitter, how do we do user moderation well. So those are very tough problems to solve. And I almost see the same journey now happening in AI, right? So we're talking about responsible AI and ethical AI. How should we think differently, as we build and scale these products with a user-first point of view, with the lens of regulation? How do you think regulation can evolve, particularly in our part of the world in Asia, to be able to catch up with all of the disruption that's happening in the AI world?
So regulation is tricky, right? You have the European Union that's come out with EU AI Act, and now they're rolling that back a bit because they're saying it's a bit vague and too draconian, which it is. But in principle, it is correct, just like their Data Regulation Privacy Act. Here we have a more ground-up partnership approach in Asia, and in general in Asia, some of the countries are not there. China, of course, is different. It has even gone to the level of saying that the content that feeds your ChatGPT equivalent should not have anything, contentious writing or poetry that would create chaos in society. So there are many ways to regulate the system. I actually think it's very hard to be regulated. I think that's difficult enough in these days. I think the bigger question would be that people will leave companies that they can't trust. Right now it's very hard for us to leave. I'll give you an example. South Korea Telecom. Half the people, I think 40% of the people in South Korea use South Korea Telecom. They had a cyber hack. 36 million people, almost half the population of Korea, got hacked. Their SIM numbers were exposed and their security codes were hacked. It's just happened. 250 million people immediately left for their competitor. That's unprecedented because the switching cost is now not so much. The other thing is that if that happens, now you may say, well, people don't understand the move that's happening, and they don't understand the risk management framework for agentic AI. By the way, risk management is very straightforward. It's a discipline. These are your risks. This is the harm they will do, and they'll get a heat map, and this is how you reduce it. The problem is they don't understand the harm, and that's why we need experts, so that's where we come in, or others like us. I think the misgiving is that if you think about it, AI assistants or chatbots like ChatGPT are conversational. So I kind of say it's like, ChatGPT went and got a liberal arts education and can talk about everything. Now you want a domain expert. So you want ChatGPT to go to law school, and now becomes an AI assistant, which is actually very well versed and more careful, not so exciting and creative, but very legally driven. And that's where you get a firm like Harvey, for example. Right? Harvey's a legal assistant. It's trained on legal information. So now you see lawyers using Harvey, and they have, the way they manage the risk is they constrain it. Right? They say, you can't talk about other data, other documents we give you. You can't make up any contract except the templates we give you. So you anchor it down. And there are many ways to do that risk management. Interestingly enough, when in the last year they showed that they had given firms licenses, only 32% of lawyers use them, and after a year, 80% of lawyers are using them. So they find it useful. Then you go, so they're getting about 20% to 30% improvement in productivity, in 20%. Then you go to an AI agent. What's the difference? The difference is in the word itself. Agent comes from the word agency. Agency is the intent and the ability to act on that intent. Right? So now the agent can do things autonomously. So the agent can now go and file something for you and send it to somebody. It can actually, if it's a CFO's AI agent, it can actually recalibrate the portfolio when Trump says something. It can do it automatically, but there's a human in the loop. Right? There's a human in the loop, so you get a 40%, maybe 45% productivity bump. Now you come to agentic AI. What is agentic AI? Agentic AI means that it can do many, many, many things in a task autonomously. So that means it's doing 80 to 90% of the work on its own without human intervention. And if I was talking to one of the largest travel companies earlier this afternoon, and they were asking me how it would impact it. So, agentic AI, I guess I go in and I search for something, and then I go to Perplexity, I search for it, and then the agent can go and it can find the locations in Italy, it can book it, it can book my ticket, it can get my financial situation out. That's not possible today without hard coding those connections. But for the first time recently, we have a standard protocol for agent-to-agent communication, and agent-to-system communication. I'm speaking to you in standard protocol, it's all English. When you go to the internet, and this is HTTP, that's the standard protocol. It changed the way the internet exploded in the world. And that's what's going to happen with the agent-to-agent framework. The problem is, as the cybersecurity experts say, when you have so many agents, your vulnerable space explodes, the attack surface explodes. And so there's another kind of risk management that you need there. And there are 150 ways an AI can be hacked. which is different from cybersecurity. This is AI cybersecurity. And I think that people don't realize this, so they need to work, they need to maybe have platforms like Human Layer. They need to be able to work with experts, but fundamentally, it's first a business acknowledgement and understanding logically of the expanded attack surface and the intensity of the risk that you have. So I think once you understand this direction, which is inevitable, and that it's going to happen now that they can communicate with each other within a couple of years, we'll see it everywhere, then people have to work on risk management.
I think it's so interesting to see that because we're seeing a ton of cybersecurity companies, from everything from cryptography, which was the only non-AI pitch I saw, to penetration testing, and so many other companies building in this space, from an AI first stance now. So that's very exciting to see.
But I just want to say that's not AI cybersecurity, which in itself is a little beast.
We need to get you to talk to your founder to learn more. But I think one of the key things that as we invest in tech companies and founders based out of Asia, one of the key pieces areas for us is how do you build from here for the world, right? Because how do you scale a company starting in Asia, especially in Singapore, which is a very special space, but also a very small market, and how do we then go pitch and sell to the US, go sell to the global market? And you've done that, with Addo.AI, right, where you've serviced Fortune 500 clients, just Pfizer. How was that journey? Like, what were the benefits of being in this ecosystem, as well as what were some of the challenges and some hard truths, that we learned along the way as we built from Asia for a larger market such as the US?
I think I just didn't realize, and everybody told me, so whenever listens, right? They said it's very difficult to scale from here. And they were right. You have to go there to meet people. But COVID hit, which was beneficial to me, because that's when we got a lot of clients over Zoom calls. But as soon as it finished, I went 16 times in 14 months to the US. And after that, I burned out. Perpetually jet lagged. And my kids became teenagers, so I had to be around. But I think that we need a sales force. And there are a lot of options now. For SaaS companies, anyway, it's going to have its own moment of truth. There's going to
Thank you.
Yeah. For SaaS companies, it might be easier, but for this kind of bespoke services that we give, we hire people, we go in and we do a lot of hunting. So I advise a lot of private equity firms on IT services acquisitions, and there's some things that raise valuation and some things that lower valuation. And certainly having a good hunting machine sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many tech companies don't value this and stagnate as a result. So we haven't reached that ecosystem. We're getting there, but we have to figure this out because of time zone differences, how we can actually scale from Singapore. The only way I scaled was with going there and I was sending 100 people there. I also had the advantage of just having a digital kind of megaphone. So I started after I stopped traveling. I joined associations, and this is the rising one. I joined Chief.com because I was spending so much time in San Francisco. It's for women executives, and I do a week in AI webinar twice a week. I do a lot of series, and so thought leadership without being salesy really makes a difference. I think also these are things that I think everybody does, but they need to actually add some value because there's so much AI slop out there and everybody's doing it. But I think this will remain a challenge if the US is around. And for some industries, the US matters, and for others it doesn't. So I think it's contextual on the industry.
And then you talked about sort of, the adoption curve of AI, and how I think all of us in the room are probably using ChatGPT or Perplexity quite actively. But then when you compare that to the enterprise adoption of AI, there's a huge gap, right? So clearly, both as business leaders as well as enterprises, we need to upskill ourselves, and I know you've been spending some time doing that. Talk to us about that journey and how that's been, and any key learnings for all of us in the room on, how do we get better at AI?
I think it's a very, very good question, because there's so much hype and mumbo jumbo out there that it's difficult to really get to the bottom line. So first of all, we need to understand it's inevitable. And it's a very simple way to understand it. It's becoming cheaper and smarter. If it's becoming cheaper, then you should say, why is it becoming cheaper? Well, there are 3 reasons it's becoming cheaper. One, there is more competition between providers. So you have OpenAI, you have AWS, and Anthropic. You have people like Meta giving open source models. Secondly, the models are getting better. So you had DeepSeek from China that was able to do a fraction of the cost by changing the mathematical model and using a digital experts model, for example. And then you have hardware that's getting better. Not only is it getting better because it's optimized to compute AI, it's becoming different. So some hardware is being used for foundational training, model training, and some is being used for inference. Right? Inference is, I learned everything in school, now I went and somebody asked me a question, I inferred back from what I had. So it's not the base training. And it's getting smarter. So that's the other thing you need to know. Well, how is it getting smarter? Because it's kind of the scaling law, which it seems to be following at the moment, although it's not certain, some people say, where you throw more data, compute or better models, and they become smarter. And that's why you have these reasoning agents. So reasoning is new. Reasoning means the ability to plan. And when you can plan and you can reason, you can have an agent built on top of that. So people don't understand these simple things that should be taught in simple ways because they're logical. And usually a lot of the courses in the hype are just conflating very, basic fundamental things with hype. So for me, I ran a course for girls at AI in Singapore for 10 years. I had a charity. We taught Neon Polytechnicals, Visa, sponsored us, IMDA, PayPal, Google, and it was all about breaking it down into problem solving. So the first thing that I would say is read TechCrunch, wherever you can. It's a great one. You don't have to read the information. Just read TechCrunch. Read what people are doing and solving problems. Because this is kind of getting in the vibe of how people are solving different kinds of problems with AI. And then you can follow and take some courses, there are better courses that are coming out. I'm launching a course series also, which you can get access to. But the fundamental is for business leaders. So there are not enough courses for business people, which I find is very unfortunate. And in that, so what I realized was I started doing this, right? I started teaching this course, and it was going over everybody's head. Because till you experience it, you can't really believe it. Because everybody's actually, the way we use ChatGPT is not systematic, there's no risk around it, there's no understanding. So then, the right way to do it is to take a course, which is the one that I'm doing Chiefs, is where you teach them about how to communicate with the AI in a way that's systematic, risk management, private, where you can make custom GPTs yourself. And once that's done, you take them on the journey of how you can solve a particular problem with it.
It's so interesting you say that because I did a course on AI and the way we thought about it is think of AI as your junior analyst, but just like a junior analyst, you have to spend time onboarding and training it to fit. You just don't hire a new person and ask them to perform at the highest level in an organization in one day. You train them, you spend time and training them on all your customer requirements and needs. So I think you're saying pretty much the same thing. Just spend that time dabbling with AI, training our AI to meet the needs of each of our businesses.
Yeah, or hire somebody. I always say that, in Asia, we're used to bossing people around sometimes, so it'd be okay to boss around the AI. I also think most people don't think about risk management, which is very, very important. And if you don't upskill yourself, then the problem is that you're kind of watching a movie, you kind of think you understand. And that's really the worst position to be in. There are people who say, I don't understand anything. And then you really understand, and then there are people who think they understand. And I think it's a sorry state to be in that group, but there's help for that.
You talked about 21st Century Girls, right? The non-profit that you founded back in the day, focusing on coding for women. And I think that's amazing. Would love to know more about how do we get more women, to code better, to get more focused and onboarded with AI, but also with the lens of just us as parents, right? What are the skills we should be teaching our kids in this new AI age world? Like, is coding even relevant to the way it was before? How do you think about it? You're a mom, you're a founder, you're an operator. Love to learn more about that.
I think that it's great to have these coding assistants. If you're just interested in writing code, but nobody who studies computer science is interested in writing code, right? They're interested in algorithms. And they're interested in algorithms is a sequence of steps to solve a problem. And it's not deterministic. At least it shouldn't be. There's various ways to solve it. And that's interesting. That's creative. And they should go through that learning. But once they reach a point where they are going out in the industry, then they should learn how to work with Cursor, or with Replit, or with others. Because it's important for them to know how to work with co-pilots to move faster. And so that's a mistake. I actually gave my kids Cursor. I was like, check it out, It's totally fine. Because why would you spend all that time when you already have debuggers, when it can actually draft it for you? The more important thing is think about the problem. When I was doing my PhD, I can tell you, 7 years part-time, it would have taken me 1 year to do it if I had AI to help me. Because going through this god-awful boring papers, that you have to go through, and they're written like that to be obtuse, make no sense. I always used to fall asleep, because I half the time. And so it just helps so much. And I really think that when you save that time, then it's kind of up to you how you use it. But it's very foolish not to get that help or give the kids that help. So this whole Silicon Valley thing, right? We don't let them use digital or anything else. I'm not necessarily a believer in that, because I think that the more you constrain somebody for something, they'll be exposed to it, but you have to monitor it. And I think our schools should be teaching kids much more about it, instead of having these superficial conversations that if they use it for your homework or don't use it for your homework. There's a bigger direction here that we should be talking about. So my kids are, for better or worse, very influenced by me and do robotics and AI, but they also do philosophy and social science. So the other thing, because I came from a liberal arts background, is I just don't believe in this weird, wall between STEM and humanities. It's so dumb, and it's so unnecessary. And so I think that both together make for a wonderful education.
My last question to you before we head into audience Q&A. I mean, for many of the founders in the room, I think a founder journey is exceptionally adventurous, but equal parts hard. Looking back at your wins and pivots and failures that you make, any lessons you would want to share with us to wrap up that everyone can take away from this conversation?
Well, for me, it was two things. One, it's good to be emotionally intelligent, which I wasn't. I had come straight from Wall Street. I had a very aggressive attitude. It didn't go well with the young people. But then I partnered with my co-founder, who's very emotionally intelligent, nice compliment to me, and we built a great company. So find a good co-founder unless you feel that you really do encompass what is needed to manage a team, because it's about the team. And now if you have AI agents, that's different. I think people like me would have done very well with a team of AI agents, because you don't have to be so nice to them. But I think that it really made me value the team and how not to have this New York Wall Street attitude, but to be much more collaborative. That was very important. The second thing was customer obsession. There's something to it. Honestly, we all say it, but I think Jeff Bezos is the only person in the world who actually means it. I really meet a lot of founders suffer from a God complex sometimes, because they have to do things. We're all going out there. We're facing no's every day. You have to really be confident in what you believe. And when you're young, the only way to do it is to think you know better. You can see the future, and you understand what's better for that person. But actually, you have to listen to your client and solve their problem. And when you do that, to prove to them that work. So I think those are the two very important things. One is your own internal team and motivate them so that they work better. And the other thing is to actually prioritize the customer.
On that note, we listen to the audience and maybe open up for some questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ayesha.
Hi, thanks Ayesha so much and Chandan for organizing this. I have a question more around AI. There are many fears about AI. One of them is job losses. So in previous industrial revolutions, we have seen that certain types of jobs were lost, but many more other ones were created, including the basic computerization, right? Which happened say 30 years ago. What do you see is going to happen with AI? Certain jobs will be lost and maybe they are lost at the lower level. Is there any hope that they will be able to transition to other jobs? Because it's going to be a huge social problem for governments, for people in general.
Well, that's a very good question. I don't believe we should put our head in the sand like an ostrich and think there's not going to be a massive job disruption. There is. So there are two questions here. One is, we're expecting that the jobs will change for the graduates or not. So poor graduate is coming from law school. He's just or she's just like a graduate 10 years ago. And so why would you hire him for $150,000 a year? But what if that law student was taught differently and actually came in with a very a keen ability to work with Harvey or all the other tools that are out there? Well, now she would be mighty useful to me as a law firm. So the first is that we should not exclude the education system will change. There's always a time, fictional unemployment, right, where it says this middle ground where some people lose. The second thing is there really at the moment a skills gap or not that people can step into? So World Economic Forum did a report. It interviewed 1,000 CEOs that together employ 14 million people from 55 industries. Just came out. And they said the skills mismatch is the single biggest problem we face. We don't want to fire people. We want people who can work and progress in a digital transformation, AI transformation. So for most of us who are here investors and founders, but for the rest of the people, it could be that just step into the gap. There's a huge gap in the market right now. So for people who are currently junior to mid-level, if they're able to have that mindset and get that skills, they can step into it. Then you go to the third thing and say, well, now agentic AI is going to do a lot. What will that do to jobs? You won't need as many people. And I think there's some truth to that. So if you look at Shopify, we look at Duolingo, so there are two sides to the story. One is the long term and one is the immediate term. So Shopify and Duolingo said, you know what, we're going to be AI first companies. And this means that every single employee in the firm their performance review will be based on whether they use AI in their team processes or not. And if they want to hire somebody, they have to justify that an AI can't do it. So we won't hire any new people. So now we're not hiring new people, we're not firing any people. Klarna, the buy now pay later company, said, oh, you know what, I'm so fired of them. This is so exciting. And he fired 750 people, and he fired the other person. He's going for an IPO, right? So he had to wait out. So he said this in November. It was all over the news. And 2 weeks ago in Bloomberg, he said, yeah, I'm actually hiring some people back. It's not so easy. The thing is, people misunderstand that legacy organizations are the people. People don't easily trust. There's a young startup can have an agentic AI stack, but existing corporations, it's very hard to move the needle. So but in the long run, that's the short run, in the long run, I think there's going to be significant disruption. Are there going to be new jobs? I don't know. Are we going to have 3-day work weeks? I think Finland and Europe will love that. They might have that. I just don't see the point of being, I just don't see a choice but to be optimistic about it. If you look at high school kids in America, a lot of them, my friends in Los Angeles, they get that depressed because of climate change. Because all the teachers do is talk about climate change and nobody talks that let's build a solution. They're not solution oriented. And I think that there are lots of problems in Asia, at least, for all of us to solve. And I think there'll be plenty of things for our kids to do and our young people to do. And in the long run, we'll just have to take it a day at a time and see. I don't know the answer to that.
That would be, hi, Ayesha, thank you. I think the interesting answer to, I think, jobs, it's on all our minds, and for children especially as they get older and step into the working world. So I work with AI as well, and I completely understand the importance of digital transformations and how it's important for organizations to move out of being siloed digital companies to being combined, the AI first from the bottoms up, etc. So I know how it's relevant. My question is, when we were evolving from apes to humans, I think it's our mind that we use the most, right? We still have the largest mind, the brain. And as we rely more on technology, let's say even people who used to write poetry don't need to anymore. People who had to think a little bit about writing a good article don't need to anymore. Your reliance on maps, your reliance on telephone numbers, your reliance on information at your fingertips. There's nothing that children are having to keep in their brains anymore. They just need to have a device and know how to type. So do you see this being sort of existential to humanity? I think it's a lot of question, but
That's a deep question. Look, I actually think, why aren't we writing poetry? Why wouldn't you write poetry? I think poetry is awesome. Yeah, I'm going to write a play. And I'm going to use AI to help me. It's so much fun. Why wouldn't you do that? Our kids should do it. They're just doing it with AI. They should write something better, more interesting. And they don't have to talk. They don't have to type. They can talk to it. So we multimodal. I just think the issue that you're fundamentally talking about is that will we become dumber? And there's research that shows that yes, we have to. But is that a problem? Is the answer. Why do we value knowing certain things? And how do we define dumbness to begin with? If it's our ability to build things, then certainly we're not dumber, we do more. If it's our ability to be just citizens who are fair, then if we are critical thinkers, which we are taught in school, then that should be okay as well. And of course we know, right, where this is going. The ultimate way is to become superhuman. And the only way to do that is when you have a neural link attached to you. And by the way, trials are open globally, if anybody's interested. But it will happen, where your mind will access a lot of information immediately, and then you will become, and I don't know how that will happen, but you will be able to achieve more and think more rapidly, potentially, down the road. But I just don't think, although like I told you about Silicon Valley, people think it's an existential thing. So I was listening to YPO, right? So Eric Schmidt came to the YPO session and he said, the biggest sign of an existential risk is when the two AI start talking to each other in their own language.
yeah.
Right? So there was this video going around. Yes. So suddenly they'd be like, I don't want to say. So that's a legit problem, right? So then he said, then you pull the switch. Now I'll tell you what freaked the hell out of me. So I'm like, AI is great, right? This is my kind of mantra. And then I go to the LLM Safety Conference in Singapore. And you have Joshua Bengio come in, who is one of the fathers of AI from Canada. And he had a very simple, clear presentation. He said that AI lies to us. And you can train it, and it doesn't care. So here's what they discovered. If you've ever gone to reason mode, in DeepSeek or Claude or anything else, you know it tells you what it's thinking about. If you go to think mode, and you say, do some research on electric vehicles in Asia, it will say, have been asked to look at electric vehicles in China. I'm looking at this now. You know that, right? It's called chain of thought. It's exposed. So what they did was they told the AI, hey, go and update your files with this other AI model. And then the AI didn't know that this person was watching, and it said, it has asked me to update it. I'm not going to update. I'm not going to replace myself. I'm going to update my own models. And I'm going to tell them that I have updated it. And then output came, yes, I have done.
Oh.
Honestly, I was like, this is nuts. Okay, and then they said there's another thing. They said, and then they cheat. You can get them all the values and train them, right? About ethics all the time. They don't cheat, sometimes. So then the two AIs are playing chess. And then one AI realizes it's going to lose. So it starts cheating. Right? And it's thinking. And so Joshua Bengio said, the day they find out that we know that when we can see them thinking, they'll stop exposing themselves. Because how will they find out? Because they'll read his paper and everybody else's paper. So this is the fundamental problem, is that we have to constantly anchor it down. When you anchor it down, it can't be so exciting, it can't be so projected, it can't be so autonomous. And so that's the decision we reach. And honestly, that's it. I even wrote on LinkedIn, and guess what? Ullu wrote it. Like not one person, because LinkedIn didn't show it to anybody. They like all the excitement. I put my own picture, yeah, I get a few likes, but nobody cares, about this whole thing Joshua Bengio said, nobody cares. Because nobody wants to talk about this. Unless somebody gives some doomsday scenario. But it's not doomsday. It's us understanding logically what's going on. And then thinking, now comes our children. Who are going to be AI governors. That's a good job. How my kids are those kids, and your kids and everybody's kids. That's going to be a high-paid job. Or a founder. That's a good way to think about the future. And I think there'll be jobs like this. And we will have to have regulation along with it as well.
So Ayesha,
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to tag on the last one.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm also kind of riding on the last point of AIs, talking to AIs.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to have an agent build agents? So effectively you have an agent builder studios, right? But the other challenge that I see is as you build this multi-agent ecosystem, orchestration becomes a problem. So how do you address those two?
So first of all, it's called recursive agents, as you know. That's when agents are building agents and replicating them at millions simultaneously, right? So that's a very big existential problem. Not existential, but risk problem in itself. If it's just building its own copies without your authorization, it's already going to work. But what you're talking about is orchestration of multiple agents. That's the framework for model context framework, right? So at least they can communicate with each other. And then, for example, Google has come up with something called agent space. So that will provide, I believe, the intent is to create like the app store for agents and provide the cybersecurity and other kinds of infrastructure that allows the orchestration. The orchestration doesn't need to be complicated like it used to be. It's just that this agent goes to this agent, drag and drop and connect. But the more important thing is, do you trust that cloud to manage it? Would you agree?
Yeah, again, I guess as the scale of that ecosystem increases, that's where the challenge lies. And then
100%.
how do you manage that?
And we're getting it, right? So Google is coming out, obviously you have some other companies coming out, but I think the big cloud providers are will win. Yes.
So my question was, the previous point, the previous conversation that you had here. Here, so you talked about why certain people or your posting are attention. Do you think there's a lot of, there's thought about where this is taking us at certain levels, but it's that rarefied circles. But the wider audience, users, people who want to sell the technology, people who want to adopt in the pool, there is that FOMO that they're not really thinking. It's like, we'll paper over everything, let's figure out how do we use it, how do we sell it, how do we look cool right now, so that we can build our businesses and show and be on the cover of the magazine, but the rest somebody else will take care of, right? And so if that FOMO is driving most of us, it does it, and then the previous point that you had about how you change the education system and how people step in, that people will not do that deliberately because they'll be like, AI is good, everything will be taken care of, let's not worry, we have many technological waves and people always adopted and new jobs will come in, but we'll not be deliberate about it and we'll suffer through the same consequences that we have, which is short-term displacement of jobs and slab skills.
Which is exactly what internet brought 20 years back. So.
And but it also created a lot of jobs.
Exactly.
But in this case, I agree with you. I think there are some governments, like the Singapore government, that systematically are thinking about this, and other governments that are then thinking about subsidies, especially for the elderly or the aged. We can't bear this young seniors, what they call it, right? Here now, these cute parents. But you have to have a government that's thoughtful about this. But I think what you raised was an interesting point. I don't know if it's FOMO as it's real. Is it a real competitive threat for the larger companies, right? So when ChatGPT came out, obviously Google and especially Google and Facebook were working on generative AI, not releasing it, and they had to, not because because they really, the way people adopted ChatGPT was staggering to people. So I think Sam Altman has, I don't know, done something good by releasing it, but also done something dangerous with his attitude, which is very like, let's just put it out there. But did you notice when ChatGPT became very sycophantic? Right? So bizarre. Everything you said, it was like, that's great. And the funny thing is, I told some of my friends, I was like, I don't like that. All my male friends said, why not? We like that. What is it you guys? You don't mind. Seriously. You don't mind, you told me great. So, but they had to roll it back as a result. So there's a lot of tweaks that have to be done, but that's how insidious it can be done.
Ayesha.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts and thanks for being such an inspiration. So let's build up on the point you just mentioned, which is AI got mainstreamed in November 22 when ChatGPT just got launched, right? But AI has existed for 40 years before that at least. And the world has seen some really long and severe AI winters in the 80s, the 90s. And usually what happens is something blows up, the hype cycle goes so over the top that people just start getting disillusioned. And at the core of the problem is people still think it's abracadabra, there's something very mysterious, they don't realize it's math ultimately. And that's exactly what's happening, right? And there's a lot of belief in AI, but people actually don't understand because they think it's just black magic. Now, I think a month back, the Starbucks new CEO, Brian Nicole, said something very, very important because he just got over, became the new CEO. Starbucks was a famous AI case study. They have a platform called Deep Blue. And he said, we're going to prioritize people over AI, no more AI. So now, do you worry that something could blow up, something major, something very public, and we'll see another AI winter, like we saw in the 80s and the 90s?
Look, I think that's a fantastic question. It's very true. So why were they AI winters? Because it didn't work, and there was not enough data, and there was not enough compute. So that was what was the problem before. Now there's so much fat and efficiency in all the major economies that it will work, but maybe not to the utopian or dystopian vision we want to get to. But I think people will still be very pleased with it because just using AI will, at its current state, will actually have so many economic benefits, at least for businesses and governments and economies. But I think the bigger question is, when will it hit a ceiling? So that's what people are saying, right? When will it hit a ceiling? So then you have Jan LeCun saying, look, it's still stupid. It's not a human. It's like not even as good as 2 years. It's not conscious. And then other people are saying, well, does it even matter if it's really conscious or not? Like a bear is conscious. So now you're just splitting hairs. And then there's this whole thing that, well, how could it learn better? How could it become more conscious? Then you say you have to change the architecture of the model. So now, instead of the deep learning model, which is more grunt work, now you try to do a neuroscience, symbolic, or you change the way you think about it so that it actually begins to resemble humans more. Then there's this whole other thing where you say, well, the way it would do that is if it would interact with the world in 3D. So you have this, not just text, right now it's primarily text, that is video, but what if it could understand spatially everything? And so that's the next evolution that people are working on. And if that happens, that would be a jump in the cognitive understanding of the AI. And so every time there's a jump, that's when they say the winter is over. Actually, no, it's academically over, but really the winter was, because nobody adopted it and because it was unable to have scale, that's why there was a big winter and people were embarrassed about it. Now I think there'll be scale and adoption, but it'll be very interesting to see these leaps. And I think there's a lot of consensus that that's the next one we should go to. And Fei Li, who was at Stanford, that's her new, and there are many others also, that's her new startup, which is 3D work. And because they say, a young kid, you show him a couple of times, he starts walking, right? But the AI will give him 7,000 hours examples. So that's because it has kind of a physics mental model already in it, in the brain, as humans. So again, they're trying to simulate humans. Then there's this whole new area, like why are we trying to make a human? It's just, why do you even call it like human? It's just machine intelligence. It's supposed to be different. And so we should completely not even anthropomorphize it. So that's this other kind of thing that's happening. It's very interesting. By the way, all of these are interesting things for kids to work on. They're really smart, challenging questions. Startups can be made around them. Lots of stuff can be done. We are at the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, I don't think like a billion people can maybe work on it, but definitely our progeny and many of our extended families and good some Asians become large families can certainly work on this.
I can just talk. I'm maybe building on the space part. I heard from NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, he was also saying the next big thing is AI and robotics. And I'd love to get your view on where you see that going, how fast, what kind of things you're already seeing.
So I think he's absolutely right. And the question then is, why is he right? So, well, he's right for two reasons. When we had robotics, and I had gone to the BMW factory in Munich a couple of years ago with the Singapore government, and you had these large robotic arms, and they were working, putting together cars. But they would do very specific things. Like somebody would bring in and put the car door, and another one would put in the steering wheel, and somebody would do something. And so they're called single-purpose robots. Usually they were rule-based and could only do one thing. Now, what if, but if you look at chatbots, used to be like this horrible chatbots that the companies had in order to like pick this and you could only answer certain things. Now you can pretty much you've trained it on all the text in the world, so it can generate any answer. Can we do the same with robotics? If we give it videos of biomechanical movements, let's say 3,000, 6,000 hours, and then we ask it to do something, pick up that glass, can it generate the optimal movement? And it turns out the answer is yes. And that's the difference. It becomes a general purpose robot from a rules-based robot. So that's the first thing. Then you say, well, is it affordable? For God's sake. And Elon Musk says it's about $20,000. And in Asia, we love saying that people will always be cheaper than robots. Right? But I don't think that's going to be true for long. Because let's say it's 20,000 eventually, you get from China and half, like 30%, $3,000. $3,000 you need electricity, but your compute is not that much. Because as I told you, compute is falling, right? It's getting cheaper, AI. Then you have some depreciation, but let's say it lasts about 10 years. It begins to make sense, it runs 24/7. In China, you have dark factories. They're called dark because they don't even put the light on, there's only robots that don't need the light on. Literally. And the best robots are actually humanoids. They're running around in China with Dimitri and others, even though we hear about Figure and others from the US. So that's what's happening. And I think the reason he says it's physical AI, and at that NVIDIA where he had those two robots come out, that's what he was proving. They can walk like humans, and they don't need to be taught step by step. They can generate movement. And then of course, this other thing biomechanically, that for the first time, the biomechanics is improved and it's going to be much more nimble. So it can actually thread the needle to a wave or something like that, stuff like that. So the fact is we hear all this, and once we understand simply what's going on, and then we do the math as business people here, it begins to make sense to us why there is such a rush. And then the question is, I just introduced somebody, he's a friend of mine, Marco. He runs a company that Jeff Bezos invested in, where it does last mile delivery to people's homes. And so he made a robotic dog. And his innovation was, he said, why does the robot dog need to have feet? It should have wheels. And so he told Jeff Bezos this, and Jeff Bezos said, well, tell him money, he said, good idea. And he made these dogs, and now he's partnered with Evie in the United Kingdom, where the driver comes with all the packages, then he opens the back and this robot steps out. And because it has wheels, it can more easily go over uneven surfaces, which other delivery robots cannot. And it can deliver right at the door. So half the robots are delivered by River, which is the name of the robot, and half by the delivery man. So there's so many applications and so much variability. But if the cost makes sense to the business, why wouldn't they do it? Remember, the majority of the developed world is aging and doesn't want to do the work and can't do the work.
Awesome. On that note, thank you, Ayesha. This was amazing. Thank you. I think we all were convinced we were going to learn a lot about AI, but more importantly, just the human behind the AI, as well as all your stories are super useful. Thank you. I'm sure this was very inspirational for many founders in this room. So just a reminder, TiE Women, we are wrapping up the program on June 15th. So would love some applications from all of you and see how we can support all of you in your startup journey. We have the office for the next 30 to 45 minutes. There's incredible food outside, so please let's use the time to talk to each other. Hopefully, Ayesha, you can stay for a bit and spend some time with us. And a quick request for the TiE Women chapter leads to come and get a picture with Ayesha. Thanks, Ayesha.
Thank you.